everyone, my name is Reggie and welcome to my channel. Today I'm really excited to be sharing with you my favorite standalone books of all time. If you didn't know, I've been posting a lot of videos about series sporadically over the last couple of months, so I thought it was time that I spiced things up a little bit and showed some love to those wonderful standalones as well. I have 11 on this list because I just couldn't decide to cut one, and while I did order these, the order doesn't mean that much because literally the book that is number 11 on this list today, when I almost filmed this video like 2 months ago, was number 3. So the numbers kind of all over the place. I have ranked them, but my mind changes on these pretty much every day. If you haven't done so already, I definitely recommend subscribing to my channel because I post new bookish videos every week and I think it's a good time over on this channel. You should also hit that bell notification, dude, to be notified when I post new videos. Today, number 11, is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli, a rom-com style book following our main character, Simon, who is in love with his anonymous pen pal, Blue. These emails are then discovered by a third party who blackmails Simon into outing him if he doesn't help him get with one of Simon's best friends. While that concept sounds super dark, this is one of the lightest, funniest, beautiful books ever. It makes me smile so much. And it's wonderful. Coming in at number 10 on this list is I'll Meet You There by Heather Demetrios. This is such a good book. I don't know why it's so low on this list. It follows a young girl, Skylar, as she has just graduated from high school and she's in that summer between high school and college. She's trying to figure out her life, what she wants to do next, how things are going to go, and how leaving her small town will go. She's from a very poor family and she's deciding how she's going to help them as she transitions into this new stage of her life. It also follows her love interest. He is a year older than her and he came back because he lost his leg in the war. I love almost everything about this book because I think it so perfectly tackles the dark topics. It doesn't say like love fixes everything. It says love can lend you a hand, a shoulder to cry on, a hand to hold, someone to be your pillar, to stand next to you, all of those things. I think it's a very true and realistic love story. I think the topics it tackles are very realistic and not handled in YA very often. I love the characters. These characters aren't perfect, but they're real and they're real characters and I love them so much for all of their flaws and their triumphs and everything. Also, this book is set very small town in Central California, which is where I grew up. So the small town feel of this book in this place in California that not a lot of people understand or talk about really hit home to me personally. Next up we have We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. We Were Liars by E. Lockhart is the story of the Sinclair family, who is a wealthy family who goes on vacation every year to these islands that they basically own. It's about these group of friends who something happens and we don't know what. But this is told in a dual timeline because it follows our main character in present day after she goes back to the island after something happened. We don't know what, and we're trying to piece it together, and we have flashbacks to the year that incident occurred. It's told beautifully. It does follow this very privileged family. I didn't think I would like a story from a privileged perspective, but I loved this book. Coming in at number 8 on this list is a book that if you've only been following me for a short bit of time, you probably have never heard me talk about before, but if you've been following me since the beginning, you will have heard me talk about this book a lot because I gushed and gushed and gushed and gushed about this book for years. And that is Reconstructing Amelia by Kimberly McCrae. So this story is told in a dual timeline and is also told with multimedia components. 2 things I absolutely love put in one book. It's great. Essentially, Amelia's mom gets a phone call at the beginning of this book that an accident has occurred. When she gets to the school, she finds out that Amelia has jumped off the building, but she doesn't believe Amelia would do that. So she ends up going through Amelia's belongings after Amelia has died and trying to piece together what she didn't know. So the 2 perspectives / dual timeline is basically Amelia's mom moving backwards from getting the phone call, trying to figure out what happened, and then we get Amelia's perspective in the past leading up to the incident. We also get a lot of multimedia, like I said in this book, so we get emails, text messages, Facebook posts, all kinds of fun stuff like that, which I thought made the book so interesting. It's also just a really sad study at like what it's like to lose someone and also to discover that maybe you didn't know that much about the person. Love this book so much. Please read it. It's so underhyped. Coming in at number 7 is The Martian, but actually I feel like I should switch these because Reconstructing Amelia is definitely better than The Martian, but The Martian is still one of my favorite books of all time. This is a science fiction book that follows our main character, Mark Watney, as he is on a manned mission to Mars. And a space storm hits Mars, his shipmates think he is dead and end up leaving without him. Guess what? Spoiler alert! He's not dead. So Mark Watney has to try to figure out how to live on an uninhabitable planet for like 5 years until the next manned mission comes to Mars. This book is so good. Mark Watney is such a lovable, interesting, dynamic character. And that's so important to this book because most of it is told through Mark's perspective. You do get snippets of the people who are on the mission with him. You do get snippets of people back on Earth trying to figure out what's happening. But for the most part, it's all Mark. So he's got to carry the story, and he does a damn fine job of doing that. And now in this list is where it gets really hard. But I did decide to give number 6 to Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This has become my favorite John Green book, which I hoped would happen, but I didn't know if it would, and I'm so glad it did. I think this is his strongest work to date because it is own voices, and in my opinion, you can tell it's very honest and true depiction of mental illness. For a lot of people, the subplot fell apart. I found it very interesting and fun. I found the characters super realistic. A lot of people hated some of the dynamics between the friendship. I thought they were so strong and beautiful. But of course, the main thing that's about this book is the mental illness rep. So if you don't know, this book is about Aza, our main character, who has OCD. As she describes it, she finds herself often in thought spirals. So basically, one thought spirals out of control, and it is very hard for her to control that thought. And this affects her everyday life quite drastically, and we explore that during the course of this book. The plot moving the story forward is that Aza's childhood best friend's dad has gone missing. I love John Green, but that's my favorite of his books. If you want to see my other favorites of John Green's books ranked, I have a video all about that. So now coming in at number 5. Number 5 is my 5th favorite book of all time, according to this, or my 5th favorite standalone, but it is, I would say, the second most influential book in my life, and that is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. I told the story many times recently, especially because I just met Frederick Bachman, but basically this book came into my life right when I needed it. I was sent this book by Atria Books in exchange for an honest review. I had to read it and get the review up by a certain time. That time lined up to be about me reading this book 2 weeks after my grandfather passed away. It was a hard reading experience, but it also helped me grieve. When my grandfather passed away, I was go, 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 doing a lot of things. I didn't stop and pause and process my own feelings and my own grief until I read this book, so it changed how I grieved. It helped me grieve. It's very special and important to me. Because of that, I tabbed the heck out of this book, and I love it so much. This character is named Elsa, and it follows her story as she loses her grandma, essentially. She's very, very close to her grandma. Her grandma is her best friend because she's bullied in school and doesn't have a lot of friends at school. Alyssa and her grandmother are very close, and her grandmother passes away. She finds a letter from her grandma and decides to give it to the person who it was intended for, and that leads her on a series of clues that lets her learn a lot more about her grandmother's life and helps her grieve in her own right, and it's just beautiful. It's so good. Frederick Bachman is my favorite author. The first book I read from him, but it's also one of his best in my opinion, and I think it's so, so good. Even if you don't have the same emotional attachment that I have to this book, I think you will really like it. I've heard a lot of people say they loved it. It's emotional regardless if you've lost a grandparent or not. Give it a go. It's so good. So number 4 is the only memoir that's on this list, but this is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I've talked about this book a little bit. This is the only book on this list that I've read this year. Clearly my favorite book of the year. This is a memoir of comedian Trevor Noah's life growing up in South America during the apartheid. And if you don't know what the apartheids are, it's basically a time where it was illegal to be born of mixed race. And so that being said, Trevor Noah's pure existence upon being born was a crime. He tackles his childhood and how different that was for him, but he talks about being a mixed race kid, not just in the confines of the apartheids, but just what that's like to not feel like you belong to one or the other culture, to not have people think you belong to one or the other group. If you don't know, biracial rep is something I'm super into in books right now. It's something that I find is a huge thing that I identify with. Trevor Noah talks about a lot of other things, of course, things I've never experienced. A lot of his experiences were different, but a lot of the things I learned from this book really connected with me, and he's so funny and his story is so unique and beautiful and strong, and his writing is great, and I love him so much. Coming in at number 3 is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I love this book so very much. If you do not know, this tells the story of our main character, Alex, whose sister was raped and killed, and Alex is out for revenge. So this is basically the female revenge fantasy brought to life. This is like 3 Billboards, but good and nuanced and smart. And I love it so much. Mindy McGinnis tackles rape culture so beautifully in this book. Our main character, Alex, is a flawed main character. Of course, you're not going to root for someone who's trying to kill someone else, but she is so unique and I love her so much. She has so many strong opinions and she's not afraid to stand up for herself. I haven't talked about this book in a long time, but it's one of my favorites. I'll be reading it soon. Coming in at number 2, we have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a book inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. Follows Star Carter after she witnesses her childhood best friend Cleo being shot down by a white police officer. It's so intense, exactly what you imagine, but it also tackles just race relations, police brutality, but also just dynamics of different cultures and Star navigating different worlds and figuring out who she is, finding her voice, family dynamics, culture, all these wonderful things in this book. And I truly believe this will be a classic in the future. I have another book, kind of like Reconstructing Amelia, that if you've been on my channel since the beginning, you will hands down 100% heard me talk about this book for so long. If you've joined me in like the last year or so, you probably have never heard me talk about this book, which is so sad that my favorite book of all time I haven't talked about in like a year on this channel. But that book is Golden by Jessie Kirby. Golden by Jessie Kirby is about our main character, Parker Frost, who is a goody two-shoes, valid Victorian bound, Stanford bound girl who just doesn't put a toe out of line. She goes according to the plan. We follow her as her senior year is coming to a close and she's starting to realize she has never taken a risk. And she's starting to worry that means she wasted her high school experience. In Parker's very small town a handful of years ago, a couple named Juliana and Shane were known as the Golden Couple. And this golden couple died before they went off to college. They were in a snowstorm. Their car fell off of a bridge. Parker finds Juliana's diary and doesn't give it to a teacher or the family. She decides to read it. So that's her stepping into outline, she decides. And in reading this journal, she discovers so much about her town, Juliana. This like mystery starts to unfold. And so it's told in 2 timelines. We have that journal and we follow that journal. So it's its own entity. We also follow Parker in her current timeline, living her senior year life as she sneaks away to read this journal. It is so beautiful. It's so good. It tackles what it's like to be in a long-term relationship as a very young person. It tackles pressures of the world around you. It is just so beautiful. It made me fall in love with Jessie Kirby as an author. So that is all for my all-time favorite standalone books. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite standalone of all time is. I'd love to know. Standalones are great. I love them. So that's all for today's video. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!